Hello and welcome to the Car Care Nut channel, and welcome to the Corolla Cross Hybrid. The Corolla Cross has been out for a few years now, and we initially reviewed it. It was a pretty nice, sensible car, but now we have a hybrid model that actually carries one secret ingredient that many people are not actually aware of. We're going to do a proper technical review. We're going to look inside, outside, and around it, see some things we like, some things we do not like, including the secret sauce for this car. Let's get started. Let's start our technical review under the hood with a little hidden gem part. This is the Corolla Cross Hybrid powertrain, and initially at first glance, just looks like a normal Toyota hybrid system. Nothing's really special about it. But did you know that this is actually the 5th generation hybrid system, or as I like to call it, the 4.5? So just like the 23 Prius, this has the latest hybrid system from Toyota. And eventually you will see the same system trickle down to other models. They just announced the 25 Camry with this system, and the first time with the 2.5. So you're going to start seeing the system, but here's the Corolla Cross Hybrid, kind of quietly comes in with that system. Let's talk about it, starting with the engine. This is the M20A FXS Atkinson cycle engine. It is the dynamic force engine from Toyota. It is, in my opinion, much superior to the 1.8 2ZR that it kind of replaced. This engine is, let's start with some of the mechanical stuff about it. Plastic valve covers at the top. It is a 2-piece cylinder head, pretty similar to other designs of Toyota, much improved. The angles of the valves allow for like a the circular tumble flow. This was something cool with the dynamic force engine. This dynamic force engine does have a 2-piece front timing cover design, just like the 2.5, same thing. They basically did all that to not have the typical front timing cover leak from Toyota engines where the head meets the block meets the front cover. This actually has a 2-piece where it bypasses that whole area. There's no sealer. This does have 2 timing chains, one of them for the cams to the crank and another little one for the oil pump. Speaking of the oil pump, this has a variable oil pump. It's an electronically controlled oil pump, so it can vary the pressure, not based off engine RPMs, actually based on electronic input from the computer. Now, this does have dual variable valve timing. The intake one is electronic. It does have a little electric motor, kind of becoming the norm in the automotive industry lately. And then the exhaust side is oil controlled. Very, very cool stuff. Now, this engine does have Toyota's D4S, so you have direct injectors, which are right underneath the intake manifold, and port injectors as well. And you do have the high pressure fuel pump sitting right on top of the valve cover. Pretty much has become kind of the standard with Toyota D4S. This engine also has EGR, and coolant-cooled EGR and this whole thing. And historically with hybrids, EGR has not been the most reliability-friendly thing, but it is here. So far there are no issues because this engine technology has basically been out since 2018. So far, so good. I guess the future will tell us if they did improve over the 3rd generation Prius, for example, the 4th generation hybrid system. Now, other things about this engine is it does have an electronic or electric water pump for the engine as well. It does have a very fancy like coolant distribution valve that can cut coolant to certain places, which helps it warm up very rapidly. I really like this engine. I've been inside a few of them. They're very well designed, very well engineered, but still conservative. Many folks have had concerns about this engine. It is still very conservative. Now, moving on from the engine to the hybrid system, which is truly the coolest part about this particular car. So this is, according to Toyota, the 5th generation hybrid system. According to those who actually look at the data, it's 4.5, because it's not a complete redesign of the 4th generation system. They did improvements, and really good ones. So the inverter is the first thing that got updated. Now it's no longer called an inverter, the converter assembly. It's called power control unit. I think it's more appropriate, even though the inverter converter is really what it does, but this is the power control unit now. It's gotten bigger. And that's usually, historically, if you look at hybrid systems, they get smaller and smaller. This one got a little bigger, and that's okay. They needed to have more room to do some of these improvements. They tweaked the DC to DC converter, which is what basically takes the place of an alternator. There's still no alternator here. They did some improvements to the internals of this. The cooling is better. Things work better. We no longer have nickel metal hydride batteries, so this doesn't have a nickel metal hydride. It has a lithium ion only. So they did things very well. And what that translates into you driving this car is this is possibly the most efficient system. This engine combined with this hybrid system is really good. I mean, this is as good as hybrids are going to be. It's super smooth. It still has that CVT drone, but it is super refined and very, very efficient. Speaking of the CVT drone, the transmission. This has equal to the Prius. This has the PB10, which is the latest iteration of the hybrid transmission in this style hybrid. Something about this transmission that is interesting, it has a mechanical oil pump and an electric one, and it has a cooler, because technically it has a dry sump system, doesn't really have oil sitting in the bottom. So it has a coolant cooled oil cooler, like a heat exchanger on the side. Pretty interesting that you see that in a hybrid car. Usually stuff like that is for performance cars, but here it is. But the biggest thing about this system that they did, which is kind of changes service-wise, which I will give you a heads up on this, the transaxle no longer takes WS fluid. It actually takes the new TE transaxle fluid. It's a new fluid from Toyota. It is supposedly lower viscosity, so you don't have as much drag. Same thing for the rear, because this is all-wheel drive and you do have a transaxle in the back, and that also takes TE fluid, transaxle fluid. That's just one of the changes they did for service. There is one more fluid you got to know about and change. And of course, nothing is lifetime. You do want to change these as well. Now, looking around here, as a mechanic and someone who have worked with Toyota hybrids for a very long time, I like the changes that they did. I wish they wouldn't have called it the 5th generation hybrid, because technically you tweak the 4th generation to the much better. I guess I understand if they call it the 5th generation because it's a little different. But the biggest thing about this is the inverter did get bigger, and that's the only thing that I was kind of wishing they would get smaller. It did get bigger, and that meant the battery no longer fits here. The 12-volt battery has to go in the back. But overall, I love the quality of things here, especially on the inverter. The engine, you know, pretty typical Toyota stuff, but the inverter, I mean, you look at some of the finishing stuff on the outside, it just looks beautiful. And this is every bit as much as what you expect from Toyota, and that's what I like here. I feel like, you know, as you'll find out when we go through this car, there are a few things that are a concern, but the drivetrain here, it's just impeccable. And that's what you expect buying a Toyota and paying that high price. You expect things here to be well made, and they are every bit as much well made. Everything feels good. Even the plastics feel good, and that, I'm glad to report that that has not changed business as usual here. Let's take a look underneath the Corolla Cross Hybrid. Front is pretty well covered, and that's the nice thing, I guess. When you get into kind of a lower price car, you expect things to be exposed, but they did cover it just like all other Toyotas. If you want to do anything with coolant or transmission related, you have to remove this entire cover. But if you're just doing an oil change, this little door right here comes off. Oil filter will be right here, drain plug here. Very, very simple. But let's look at the front suspension here. Very big and kind of a beefy lower control arm here with a separate ball joint that is kind of a Toyota signature. Single piston caliper here, McPherson setup, steel sway bar link, which is something very good. Toyota's been kind of slowly switching to aluminum sway bar links. This one does have a steel one, which is good. As we walk back here, I noticed these two braces. There's one here and one on the other side. It's pretty interesting. They're trying to just do something to make it drive better. Now, this is not, even though this is an XSE model, it's not really a sport-oriented car. This is a very sensible car. Now, this is a hybrid, so you have the two high voltage cables. One of them goes to the battery, and then from there it goes to the rear unit, which we're going to take a look at in a moment. Exhaust is very high quality, and I like that even though this is made in that Mazda Toyota factory, the exhaust is still pretty high quality. Now, this does not have, I'm seeing that they're slowly getting rid of the coolant going to the catalytic converter to warm up. This doesn't have it, which is good. This catalytic converter just sits right here, kind of wide open, so I hope catalytic converter thefts are calming down. All the finishing in the body otherwise is typical Toyota. I was a little concerned because we're going to talk about it a little bit. The body fit and finish is touch and go, but things here are pretty typical Toyota, and that is a good thing. Brake and fuel lines are right here. Leads us to the fuel tank, which kind of sits in an interesting location. This style of bolting of the fuel tank, you notice this doesn't have straps. It just has 4 bolts, I think, something like that, but they look like this. They started that right around 2018. I think is a much better idea. The fuel tank straps are actually an old design, and this is their new design. I think this is much better. Let's look at the rear suspension here. Interesting thing, usually you'll see in this style suspension from Toyota, you know, trailing arm, few arms here and there. You'll see an aluminum knuckle. This one actually has a steel knuckle. It's actually a good thing for longevity. And then you do have another single piston caliper here with the actuator for the electronic parking brake, which is pretty cool. This is one of the cool things about Corolla Cross. This is a height sensor for the adaptive headlights, which is something, this is where Toyota does things so interesting. But their options are never consistent with all their models. You'll have a lesser model that has better options than a higher model, something they love to do. This is an all-wheel drive model. You notice big MGR right here. This is a differential and electric motor. It's not a huge unit, but it is all-wheel drive nonetheless. One interesting thing that I skipped over, look at this sway bar. That is a very over-elaborate sway bar link. I wish they make all of them like this. First, it looks very beautiful, the design, and then it's basically a chunk of steel. That is very interesting. Then the exhaust wraps up to a single tip. Nothing really about it. But the one thing I'm noticing here, and I guess Toyota is following suit with other manufacturers, this is just wide open. There's nothing here to cover anything. Usually they put a little cover or something. Nothing. Same thing on this side. This, I guess, is becoming kind of a trend in the automotive industry. Let's take a look on the outside of the Corolla Cross Hybrid. Now, here's something that Toyota did with the hybrid model. You don't have an LE, an XLE. It's something that we praised over the previous, review that we did of the non-hybrid. You only have the sport models. Some things are a little subtle, but the look, this just looks a little odd. I feel like it was a last-minute addition, and the bumper just looks off. I actually don't like the look of the hybrid one. I wish it was the same as the other one, and we have an LE. This is a sensible car, hardly a sports car. But what is more concerning to me about this is not really the looks. I mean, this is a sensible family car that is not really a showstopper or whatnot. But what is concerning to me is the Mazda Toyota manufacturing plant, kind of the fit and finish. It is not the Toyota standards, not the paint, not the gaps, and that is definitely a concern, and that I hope gets better. You look at something like this gap. This is absolutely not a Toyota style gap. It just looks off, looks huge. And then this gap is absolutely enormous. Again, not the end of the world, doesn't affect functionality and whatnot, but I mean, these are the little stuff that you expect from Toyota, and this one doesn't feel as such. Now, this does have the kind of the blacked out badges, and I like that they included this one, which has a radar sensor behind it. This does have standard laser cruise control, radar cruise control, and lane keep assist, which is pretty cool. As we wrap around the side, I want you to note this. This one is piano black, which is nice. The wheel arches and the bottom is not. I mean, this is a top of the line XSE model. I wish these were the same to match. It just looks off. You go from the piano black here to just matte finish here. That's okay. And then this has the black roof, and I guess the mirrors are to match. Usually we'd say they ran out of paint here, but this just matches the roof. So I guess we can live with that. This does have smart key only in the front though, not in the back, which is understandable. This still have something that the regular Corolla Cross has, which is kind of an optical illusion. If you look here, they kind of made this dip and then another dip. It kind of gives it that this is a lot more raised when you look at it from far away, but it actually is not. The body otherwise on the side is extremely simple. There's just one little body line that kind of disappears here. If it was not there, it would have been the same, but we get to here, it is actually raised a little bit, and it does have that same effect. Kind of gives it an optical illusion that it is a lot bigger than it is. It does have a little bit of raise, but it's not huge. The fuel door is huge though. I don't know why this fuel door is this big, but that's what they did. Now, there's something that is cool when you look at it initially, then it starts to kind of get old. You look here in the tail light, and same thing with the headlights. They imprinted Corolla Cross. Very subtle, very nice, but then there's Corolla Cross here. And in the front headlight, and on the side, and on the inside. I feel like they started with a good idea and got carried away a little bit. But this is not a big issue. I think from the back though, they didn't do a lot of changes in the XSE model and the hybrid. This still reminds me of the first generation Toyota Sienna, which is, it's not an offending look. And this is what you want with cars like this. You want a simple, functional look, and there's nothing more functional than this. Because if we look in the very back, power door, which is optional. This is good space. It's not the biggest in the planet, and I wish there was a little bit better coverage here. Now this does have the JBL speaker right here, which takes even more space out of the back. But I feel like the slope of this is not super swoopy to make it. No, they gave you the maximum space here. This one does not have a spare tire, although when I pull this, I see a perfect spot for a spare tire, except it's taken off by the high voltage cable, which looks like a complete afterthought. I wish they would have wrought this better and kept the spare, but they didn't, and that's okay. This is just, when you take a car that I feel like it was initially not designed to be a hybrid, and then last minute they decided, ooh, let's make a hybrid. This is the stuff you get. It's not the end of the planet. But what I do like about this is, even though this is technically not a high-end car, you do have the close the door or close and lock it, which is a pretty nice feature. Now, lastly, we have to talk about this color. And of course, if you look here, this out of the little stuff we saw in the other model, you have the silhouette of the Corolla Cross. Now, these are the little stuff that gets the designers really excited, but again, this is an everyday car. I don't know if anything will get excited about this. But the one thing we do have to talk about is the color. If you'd like to get a Corolla Cross, I recommend you don't get this color. This color looks odd on a picture. It looks even worse in person. This is my least favorite color in this particular car. Put this color on a 4Runner, maybe we have something to talk about, but this color, folks, if it intrigues you on a picture, you need to see it in person. It's not the best color. It absolutely does not match the image of this car. Let's take a look at the inside of the Corolla Cross Hybrid. And just like the regular Corolla Cross, I really like this interior. It's basic, it's functional, it's focused. There is no gimmicks or anything over elaborate with the design. Now, the dash does look like a football field. It's huge, and that I wish they would have made it a little smaller and make a little bit more room, but that's the design they went with. Everything is physical button, and that's the nice thing. Even in the lowest trim of the hybrid, which is the S, you still have a single zone automatic climate control, which is pretty cool. The infotainment screen is actually updated to the 21 model year. That's what they call it. This is the latest one that started with like the Tundra and kind of slowly trickling in all the models. It is good, featureful, but it is glitchy, and that is the one thing they say over-the-air updates. I'm yet to see the over-the-air updates, but it does work, and it's a good step forward. Now, this has a physical shifter, which I love, and everything just physical button. This car does not give you a headache to operate, and it's very simple. Now, in this higher trim, this is the XSE, you do have a little screen, and that's the whole gauge. It just feels like there's a screen in the middle, and the rest is just blank with all warning lights and whatnot. I wish this would have just had gauges, and a little screen in the middle would have been fine as well, but that's what they went to. So in case you want to go to the higher trim for the screen, it's not worth it. It does absolutely nothing that gauges and a little screen in the middle wouldn't do. That's just heads up. Now, being a sport model, this is the XSE trim we're reviewing here. It does not have super uncomfortable seats. Now, when you get to this high trim, you do have power driver seat with lumbar support, which is nice. I wish that was available as an option. Should folks need lumbar support in the lower trims, I wish that was available as an option. It is not. And the overall ride of this car is pretty smooth, and that was one of the coolest things about it. They did not go with a harsh sport suspension that's going to jar you and does anything but sport in the actual handling department. This is not a car that handles well. This is a car that's supposed to be comfortable. Steering wheel is comfortable. It's not very hard. It's not jarring. It's smooth. It's actually surprisingly smooth, even for the XSE with the bigger wheels. That is a pretty welcome thing. Now, this car has Toyota Safety Sense 3.0. And one notable feature of that, in addition to all the stuff that are standard, because this trim has blind spot monitor, you have something called a safe exit assist. Basically, if you're about to open the door and there's like a cyclist coming through, as soon as you open the door, it's actually gonna start beeping in the car. It's gonna start flashing the light in the mirror, and it's gonna make an audible sound outside to alert the cyclist that you're about to open the door. That is a pretty cool feature, and I think if you switch a little bit to the Lexus side with their electronic handles to prevent that, that would have worked too, but they decided to go with the electric handles here. They didn't. This has a mechanical handle, but it does alert you that somebody's coming, and then if you still open the door, it's going to alert them that you're opening the door, and that is pretty cool for a kind of a sensible basic car. That is a pretty cool feature. Now, this feature only works up to 3 minutes after you shut off the car. It'll stay active. After that, it disables. It actually displays a message that it is disabled. Now, another thing about this car, the fit and finish, this is not a exotic luxury car or whatnot. You expect the interior to be full of hard plastic and not really the highest end material, but usually Toyota, they do their interiors well, with the exception of one thing in this car. Well, that is the headliner. First, the material is this fluffy material that feels like it's about to fall apart, and then the implementation and the way it is. Let's take a listen to this little clip. Yeah, I don't know what happened there. I wish they would have put even cheaper feeling material here, but at least it's not creaky and just feels like extremely cheap. That's the only place in this car that you'll find it very cheap. Otherwise, everything, it's hard plastic, yes, but it does feel well built, and that's good. Let's take a look at the back seat of the Corolla Cross Hybrid. Battery lives underneath you here. You do have the battery fan filter, which you should maintain and keep clear and clean, and you should actually regularly maintain that filter. I am 5'7". This is my driving position. It feels very small in here. I have to say it. There's very little knee room, and the seat comes back so much that it feels like a cramped place. The seat is comfortable itself, but it doesn't feel large in here. So if you're going to regularly carry adults here, this may be an issue. But the cool thing is here, you do have 2 rear vents. You do have very low, but they're still there, USB-C 2 of them actually. But I feel like they could have put it a little bit more up because it's way down. We really have to reach in there to connect to something. But hey, at least they gave you those. In a car like this, usually you don't expect stuff like that. Let's talk about some things I do not like about the Corolla Cross Hybrid. The first thing is, which is kind of a surprise, because I've seen a product out of the Mazda Toyota factory before. It was better built. This one, the fit and finish, especially on the outside and some aspects of the inside, like the headliner, it leaves more to be desired. Toyota usually are really good about their fit and finish. This one, not to the level that I'm used to or everybody's used to from their fit and finish on the outside and the inside. But past that, the biggest thing to me is the lack of a base model. Yes, technically the Corolla, if you look at the trims, you have an S, an SE, and an XSE. We are back to the sports thing. This car is the furthest thing from a sports model. They did it really well with the regular Corolla-ish. They only made an LE model, but then later they came out with the others. But they did it backwards here. They should have started with the base models, then add the hot models. It's not really a hot model at all. But the only good thing about that is they did not go with jarring, harsh suspension or put very skinny tires and huge wheels. They didn't do that, which is okay, but they should have just stuck with the LE model, because the shopper for this car will want a sensible car, not really anything remotely related to sports. And then the last thing is the badging. And we mentioned this in the previous review when we reviewed the regular one. You know, there's the little subtle Corolla cross that is written to the headlight and tail light, even though 4 corners is a bit much, but that's okay. You know, it's something nice. But then it's on the roof rail and on the inside and on the back, and it's just like they got a little bit carried away, and the silhouette everywhere. All this costs dollars, and if you remove all this stuff, it's going to equal less dollars, which is the buyer for this car will really appreciate any discount from its price, because cars are getting expensive these days. So little gimmicky stuff like that, if they take them away, nobody will miss them at all. But what they will appreciate is a few bucks off the price of the car. And this is the thing with cars like this, they don't need to be gimmicky. I mean, this is even the XSE and the whole sports thing, it's a breath of fresh air how sensible and functional it is. But the little stuff they could have get away with, it will make it even better. So should you buy a Corolla Cross Hybrid over the regular Corolla Cross? Folks, the regular Corolla Cross is for lack of a better word, a breath of fresh air. Not everyone wants an exciting car that is all techy and geeky. There's a lot of us that just need a car to take us from point A to point B without drama, without fuss, reliably, well, and be functional. This is a car that focused on functional more than anything else. And even the design of the outside and everything is focused on that. But now the hybrid iteration. The hybrid iteration takes that functional and sensible to the next level. Because, as you find out in this video, the secret sauce of this has a 5th generation hybrid system. Many people don't even realize this is a 5th generation hybrid system here. Just like the new Prius that came out, which was a big deal because of the way it looks, this kind of flew under the radar. Folks, this is a lot more efficient than many cars in this segment, and the gas mileage that you get from it is pretty impressive. It's a very smooth system, and you notice it. You get into something like a RAV4 hybrid, and you get into this, you're going to notice some difference in the way they drive, because this has the 5th generation hybrid system. Pretty soon the RAV4 will get it as well. But if you're buying today a hybrid, and comparing kind of hybrid to hybrid, this is the latest iteration of their hybrid system. Now, this car is not perfect. No car ever is. The fit and finish in the outside is a concern, and that is one of the things that I wish they would improve, especially with their new manufacturing plant with Mazda. But the most important thing here is the lack of base trim. Yes, they do have the Corolla Cross S, which is now we're all about sportiness again. This car is the furthest away from a sports model. It's a hybrid first. Second, it's a sensible little crossover. We don't need a sport model in this, but the only good thing about that is this is an XSE model. It is not jarring. They didn't go and change all the suspension. They just made it kind of a trim. A little bit sporty looking, a little bit sporty stuff on the inside, but they didn't completely ruin it. But I still wish we would have a Corolla Cross Hybrid LE, kind of like we have the Corolla LE, because that's what people want. They don't want to spend a fortune for all these options. They just want a basic transportation car. And this, at the starting price of right around $27,000 plus the destination fees or whatnot, it's still pretty sensible, because this is a very functional car, and now it has a 5th generation hybrid system, which makes it even a better deal. Folks, I hope this video was helpful and informative. I hope you learned something new. If you like it, consider giving it a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, consider subscribing to the channel. Check out some of my other videos. Until the next video, folks, may the Lord bless you and keep you, and you have yourself a wonderful day.